Good evening and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns Hour here on YouTube. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Monday. It is November 25th, 2019. And we're going to start tonight by talking about some stuff that I talked about over the weekend over at my blog at tomluongo.me about Mike Pompeo. And rumors are circling hot and heavy that Mike is considering leaving his current job as Secretary of State. So, and returning to the Senate. Oh, good hello from Iceland as well. But Sigurdur Stefan. Hope I didn't butcher that too badly. That's be the first time I think someone's self-identified as an Icelander on one of my streams. So welcome. If I did butcher it, well, I'm very sorry. I'm an American. What did you expect? All right, but we're going to talk about Mike Pompeo tonight. For a bit, and then we're going to talk about I'll do my nicely done. We'll talk about that tonight, and we'll also probably do a little bit, since this is a Thanksgiving stream, we'll probably talk about some of the things that, well, we should or should not be thankful for. And one of them is the idea that Mike Pompeo will no longer be Secretary of State. But before we get to any of that stuff, let's do the quick remind that you can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on weekly at moneyandmarkets.com, usually on Friday mornings. A couple of times a month now on Strategic Culture, as well as I am now again the editor of a monthly newsletter, both my own Gold Goats and Guns newsletter, which you can get through Patreon, as well as over at Newsmax, where I'm now the editor and head steerage guy, captain of the ship over at Ultimate Wealth Report. So all those things are going on at the same time, and amazingly enough, I'm still able to do this. All right, so if you like what you hear tonight, as always, please, give like, subscribe, do all the stuff, tweet it out on Twitter and all that kind of happy jazz. Let people know what's going on. Not that it really matters. We have our own little echo chamber over here of about 3,000 people at best, and that's fine with me. I've given up caring about building this into a huge, ridiculously large audience because, frankly, I'm not usually fit for human consumption. So, that being said, good evening, Mark Bogosian. Good evening, Jonathan and Gaius and everybody else who showed up so far. And I'm sure people will trickle in as the evening goes along. So, okay, before I get to that, I've got to talk about what North on 60 just said. So I just got a tweet from her earlier in the afternoon about letting me know that Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine, is currently in Canada drumming up support probably for running more guns, which is what he's really good at doing. It's far better at that than he is at actually selling chocolate to people anymore, which is more's the pity, of course. And she's really wishing that one of us would come north of the border and, well, ask him kindly to leave. I don't blame you, love. I really don't. All right. So let's talk about Mike Pompeo. So over the weekend, I wrote this piece about Mike Pompeo, and the last time we spoke, my last live stream, I went on about the fact that I thought that the flying monkeys were in charge, that we're still living in this post-Dorothy Oz environment where we can see everything that's happening in front of us, and we can see the corruption, and we can see these people, all of these would-be emperors are running around naked with, and in Mike Pompeo's case, that's frightening. And we're not impressed by them anymore, right? We're just not. And it's one of the things that I don't think they've gotten the message yet that we can see them. Or they're, at the very least, they just think that even though we can, there's nothing we can do about it. And that's, I think, the scarier part. Guys like George Soros know we can see them. He doesn't care. Guy like Charles Koch, he doesn't care, right? What's his name? That the little Jewish troll. Oh God, the Las Vegas guy. Him that's been advising Trump. Sheldon Adelson. That's that guy, right? That guy's just a little troll. And I think they really don't think that we can see them. It's like, and we can. And they have no credibility with us anymore. They haven't had credibility with us for quite a long time, but it's getting to the point now where everybody looks at them and goes, what are you talking about? Right? So I just, when I look at a guy like Pompeo, obviously now angling for his golden parachute out of the office of Secretary of State, and that's the rumor's been going around for months now that he's planning on, fucking off back to Kansas, at least thinking that, now that he's done destroying Oz, he can now, fuck off back to Kansas and get his golden parachute gravy train and ride that for the next 30 years. Problem is that the U.S. Senate's not going to be anything like it's been for the last 30 or 40 years in terms of it being a gravy train for everybody. The corruption's too endemic. It's too far advanced to be truly profitable anymore, because the money that's going to be flowing through there is going to be dropping over time. We haven't quite reached peak dollar, and we haven't quite reached peak United States yet, but we're really close to it. Maybe we've reached peak United States. We certainly haven't reached peak dollar yet. I think we have reached peak United States the more I think about it. But in order to go through that peak, because of the massive synthetic short position against the dollar that exists because of all the dollar-denominated debt that's out there, I don't see the dollar being dethroned as the world's reserve currency, for example, anytime soon. And we're gonna have to go through a very painful adjustment as the dollar rises, as the global financial system melts down and has to, and the United States will be one of the last bricks having not been knocked over before the new system is put in place and before we see a complete shift in where the centers of global capital will wind up. And most likely that will be in China, and it will be somewhere between 10 and 15 years from now. But for right now, the dollar is still king. Guys like Pompeo still think that all roads lead down, all roads lead to Washington, and that's where it is. And so, as a Secretary of State, it's never the end of someone's career. It's always a stepping stone to something else. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Energy Secretary. Most cabinet positions are purely stepping stones to something greater. So are the plum ambassadorial jobs, like ambassador to the UN, Germany, other places along those lines, right? So, and when you look at when you start to contemplate the idea that Pompeo will walk away from Goodship Trump and move to the Senate, he's doing so with the idea that he hasn't ticked off Donald. Okay. And it's funny. Someone sent me a 4-minute video by Steve Pacenic the other day. And guy I normally don't give the time of day to. He's interesting, but for the most part, intelligence agents 9 times out of 10 are only telling you one half of the story, if not a side of the story that isn't actually even real, but has some kernel of truth in it. These guys are very, very good at that. And so I always watch a guy like Pacenic or take anybody's input gained from him with a very weather eye, with a lot of salt, right? I just salt to take. Because, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who we're talking about here, right? Former intelligence is kind of an oxymoron. No one's ever former intelligence. Okay, former intelligence agents are burned and then usually removed from the scene. They're not usually allowed to hang around, and certainly not allowed to hang around in the public sphere and drop quote-unquote truth bombs on anybody. I just don't believe that. And maybe I'm wrong to believe. Maybe I'm wrong to think that way. Maybe, Steve is on the up and up, and that's great. But his analysis of Mike Pompeo as a man was what was compelling about this little video of his that I watched. And there's a link to it. It's in my latest article that's on my website, not my latest article, the one I wrote on Sunday, so you can find it there. And there he's making the argument that Pompeo has always been a social climber, and he's always been a guy who's eschewed a standard, the path that was laid out in front of him, because he's always had bigger goals. So, for example, he goes to West Point, he graduates first in his class, he could easily be on his way to becoming a general, and no, he goes into private business. And then after he, builds a weapons, a business selling weapons, he then winds up in Congress. Why does he wind up in Congress? Because it's, and he remakes himself as a neoconservative and as a Christian fundamentalist when he was raised Catholic, because he's as Italian as I am. And he's worse, he's an Italian from California. So, you look at that, and a lot of these things I didn't know, right? So I'm listening to this, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is a different version of this guy than I've gotten before. And so now, all of a sudden, he's risen up to the head of CIA under Trump, and then as Secretary of State. That's exactly where he wants to be. But he's ingratiated himself, and he's been able to move through the Trump administration the way he has, because he's always fronted loyalty to Trump, and loyalty is very important to Trump. So you say to yourself, okay, but is he really loyal? And I was talking about this with Lee and Garland over on Fault Lines this morning, Lee Stranahan and Garland Nixon on Fault Lines. And by the way, tomorrow I'll be publishing the conversation I had with Garland on Sunday morning. Garland and I sat down for an hour and a half on Saturday morning, chatted about a whole bunch of things. So it's a good talk. I'm going to edit it in the morning and clean up the audio and get that sent out as tomorrow's podcast. But which will be available on iTunes and Spreaker and YouTube and a variety of other places. It'll be on my website as well. Find it there, and you can subscribe to the podcast if you so choose. So I look at Pompeo and I think to myself, is he really loyal to Trump? Because when you look at his record as Secretary of State, he's always been that much more hawkish than I think Trump is comfortable with. What do I mean by that? Well, Trump wants to go full pressure on Iran. What does Pompeo do? Pompeo publishes Trump says X, and then Pompeo always does 1.5x. He always goes a little bit farther than he needs to or should, because he actually doesn't want to do any form of diplomacy or any form of negotiation. Whereas Trump is all about negotiation. Trump's all about getting people to the table to talk to him. Yeah, he makes big asks up front, but that's part of his thing, and everybody knows that. But Pompeo's big asks of Iran, of Lebanon, of Iraq, of Ukraine, Germany, if you look at his record, North Korea, if you look at his record of what he does as a diplomat, they are always these over-the-top statements of, you give up your sovereignty and we'll deign to actually talk to you. And if you don't, we're going to destroy you. And while Trump may be fronting that, I fundamentally believe that Pompeo means it. And that's the failure of him as a diplomat, because he's not a diplomat. He's not been involved in any significant negotiations. He just shows up to places and makes unreasonable demands. And then Trump has to go in behind him and clean stuff up. Trump was doing the same thing with John Bolton. And so I really do think that Pompeo thought he could maneuver and wheedle Trump by always be saying he's loyal to him. Yes, he does remind me a lot of Chris Christie. The weight thing was obvious. And I look at him and I'm like, there's something not right here. Right? If Sigurdur, you've got an interesting point about Pompeo and Trump playing good cop, bad cop is cringeworthy. It is cringeworthy. But I don't even see it. But Trump doesn't even play good cop well. He doesn't even play good cop well. And Pompeo doesn't play bad cop well. And the whole thing about, and we've been like running this game for a long time, that we thought that they brought Bolton in to be bad cop while Trump played good cop and all that stuff. No, that was never the case. John Bolton came in to be bad cop and to stop Trump from being good cop. And I honestly believe that Pompeo's been doing the same thing. Just massaging Trump's ego more along the way and thinking that he can outfox Donald Trump. And I really do think this. And he is a terrible liar, North on 60. You're absolutely right. And so when you really stop to think about it, has Pompeo's Department of State been loyal? Has Pompeo done anything in 2 years as Secretary of State to get rid of and out the people most disloyal that have been covering, like Janet Yovanovitch or Marie Yovanovitch? Sorry, for some reason I keep thinking her name's Janet, but Marie Yovanovitch, right? We know this woman's a ridiculous Clintonista. We know that she's as deep state as they get. We know that the same thing with Fiona Hill and the rest of them. We know all of this stuff. This stuff is easily traced. How Trump would even consider these people to be acceptable in these roles for this long is beyond me. Only because he's so freaking busy dealing with all the other crap that goes through his day, right? It's easy for us to forget that there is only 24 hours in Donald Trump's day. Meanwhile, we're out here, and the other days that are supposed to be spent, man days being spent to support Donald Trump, to get him the information he needs, he's not getting because his staff refuses to give it to him. Right? So while we're out here collecting all the damn data going, oh, well, this obvious he should know that Fiona Hill is a freaking Clintonista and it's terrible and horrible and all of these things, probably doesn't know. So how long did Pompeo cover for Yovanovitch? How long has Pompeo covered for all the other people in the Department of State? Right? Who are now being paraded by Adam Schiff every day in front of the news, in front of the reporters, and on Capitol Hill to further gaslight the Democrats, to further distract Trump with bullshit and this impeachment thing, and at the end of the day, and what happens when Trump just finally looks at Pompeo and goes, why didn't we know about any of this stuff earlier? Hey, Mike, why weren't these people fired? Because you know Trump's going to ask that question at some point. Now, where I think this leads is the following. Where I think this leads is Pompeo is setting himself up to be the next Mitt Romney. You don't leave Secretary of State. See, here's the gig, right? Pompeo wants to leave Secretary of State. He wants to leave on good terms with Trump, go back, get Trump's blessing and McConnell's blessing to go run for Senate in Kansas. He'll be a safe Trump seat, right? If Trump wins re-election. Will he? I mean, the truth of the matter is you can't trust any of these people, right? You can't trust them at all, because it would be Pompeo who would then be able to stand up there credibly and say, after he votes to impeach Trump over or convict Trump of some ridiculous shit and thing that happens in his second term, because they'll bring up another impeachment trial in the second term. They can't get rid of him on this one. And they'll be like, oh, well, I used to be, and he left if he leaves the Trump administration on good terms, his betrayal will carry tremendous credibility with the bullshit media. We know this. We see it all the time. They were trying to turn John Bolton into the hero of the resistance because, well, he's a Trump loyalist. And now he's giving us the real dirt on what goes on in the Trump administration and all this stuff. And you've got to believe him. And no, Trump's actually neutered it. Bolton is now Bolton's done in being able to set policy ever again. All he's going to do now is he gets his book deal and then he'll be on MSNBC, but nobody's going to trust this guy anymore. And so you've got to, if you're Trump, you've got to kill Pompeo. The threat of him in the future coming back to bite you in the ass. He didn't do it with Nikki Haley. He let her get out. He let her get out the door nicely. If anybody honestly thinks that Trump hates women, look at the way he treated Nikki Haley, even though he knew she was freaking disloyal to him in every freaking way. I still think the timing of her getting fired has everything to do with the Elin plane getting shot down and the incident that nearly started World War III. And I think that she was instrumental in this and allowing this to happen by passing information through and being Israel's proxy at the UN. I absolutely believe it. I don't have any freaking proof. This is just my spidey sense. And Trump fired her. And I said that the day she left, I said he fired her. But he wouldn't do it publicly. And he didn't want to, it's like, no, well, okay, you just need to leave now. Right? Left her career intact. He was being nice. And then he found out just how deeply these people are disloyal. And that included Mattis, who he trashed on his way out the door, and Bolton, and Tillerson, and everybody else that's come through that office. And he will destroy them all. He will not let a guy like Mike Pompeo get out alive unless Pompeo is actually loyal to him. So we're going to watch to see how this plays out. And according to Pachenik, Trump's going to fire him. We'll see if he's right. I tend to think that that's probably what's going to happen here. Because Trump has been going after Pompeo, starting to make noises about him. Keep your eye on that. All right. And so guys like Pompeo think they're in charge. They have their fiefdom now, and they can use that power to run operations. And, we'll just keep telling Don what he needs to hear while they go and do what they want to do. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Of course, Pompeo is loyal to Israel. They all are. More so than Trump. And Israel, by the way, can't even get a government together. We're all sitting here worried about, the failing government in Lebanon, the problems in Iraq, potentially, the uprisings in Iran and everything else. But, Netanyahu's been indicted. There ain't no government. Now the Knesset's going to try and form a government. It's not going to have Netanyahu in it. So, what's going to happen in freaking Israel? We're doing all this stuff. We're sticking our necks out here for Israel and Saudi Arabia, and neither of them are even close to being stable regimes. So, and if Pompeo is fired by Trump, he will be persona non grata within the Kansas GOP. Yeah, I see a bunch of people weighing in about Netanyahu, my comments on Netanyahu. I'll talk about it. Hearing that the Likud Party is trying to get rid of Netanyahu. Yeah, they want to actually be in power. They have enough. They earned 32 seats. But they can't form a government because Netanyahu is unacceptable to every other party. So it's really obvious what the solution is. Get rid of Netanyahu, form a government. So it's gonna. I think that the Likud Party finally overthrows Netanyahu, and then they finally throw his ass in jail. I think a lot of things change from an Israeli policy perspective. I mean, look at Pompeo going out on a limb unilaterally declaring the settlements in the West Bank to be legal. Really? So it's interesting. So John Flynn says, there's so much criticism about Trump here. Lots of good things happening. Really? Really? I mean, look, I don't mind Donald Trump. I mean, I'm not crazy about him, and I certainly do have a bit of buyer's remorse. But I don't think good things are happening. I think that's Donald Trump being very good at being Donald Trump. He's getting let off the hook economically and for his ruinous trade policy because Europe is as much of a mess as it is. And that's only holding things together as capital flees out of Europe. Okay? The Fed's actually now bailing his ass out again. That's a better way of putting it, Mark Bogosian. There are fewer bad things happening than there are actual good things. There aren't good things happening, right? Jeffrey Epstein is dead and no one's really investigating it, right? Trump's cabinet is and has been from the beginning a complete, utter fucking nightmare. It looks like the third Bush administration. And I mean, and that's just, you have to look at, really? No more regime change wars. Peace is happening? Not really. Every time Trump tries to do something worth a shit, he gets bamboozled into doing something bad. Did you see the report the other day of, so we're going to now secure the oil for Syria, which we can't do. But we're going to still blow up people on the Euphrates River trying to smuggle, quote unquote, smuggle oil, that's Syrian oil, to Syria, the Syrian government. And we blew them out of the water. And, dropping hundreds of barrels of oil into the Euphrates River to enforce this embargo against the Syrian government. This is going on. Okay? Why are we doing this? Because someone finally convinced Trump, well, pull out of the north and allow that to happen, which was good. That was smart. What Trump pulled off with Erdogan and Putin was brilliant. But then he won't go the full 9. He goes one step forward and then 2 steps sideways. Takes all those troops and puts them in Saudi Arabia, sends more Patriot missile systems to Saudi Arabia. It's not going to stop the Houthis from sending drones in and blowing up Aramco's assets because they can't cover the whole country. It's all window dressing. It's all appearances. When the truth of the matter is that the Saudis are already suing for peace with the Yemenis anyway. And we don't need the oil. But Trump loves the idea of getting paid for all the work that we did. Like, he actually thinks we destroyed ISIS. When the Russians and the fucking Syrians and the Iraqis did more to destroy ISIS than we did. The popular mobilization units, which we bombed and we've allowed Netanyahu to bomb, have done more to kill off ISIS than we ever fucking did. We harbored them, for Christ's sake. We're still harboring them at Al-Tan. Or has nobody told Donald Trump that yet? Does he not know this? Because he acts like he doesn't know what's actually happening, which is reported all over the friggin' place from multiple sources. This is what I'm talking about. I mean, Trump drives the Democrats crazy. He's great. He drives the deep state crazy. He's great. He's driving the intelligence community crazy. That's great. But on foreign policy, he's a complete fucking nightmare and has been since day one. And unfortunately, foreign policy is far more important than domestic policy. The regime change wars aren't ending. We still haven't pulled out of Afghanistan yet. We still haven't brokered a peace deal in Afghanistan yet. Even though things are better, even though Milley, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is far better than Dunford. Yes, And yes, we've gotten rid of some of the Clintonistas running in ambassadorial positions in the State Department. Yes, those things are better. So what? If Trump is removed from office in a year or loses the election, or, which is not likely, but, they just steal the election from him, then all of what any good stuff that's happened will just go right back to where it was before. Because not enough has actually happened to change anything other than our perceptions of what's happening. Now that's changed, and that we can thank him for, and that we can be thankful for, without a doubt. I'm not saying that Trump has been useless in any way, because he hasn't been. But he hasn't been as useful as as most of his fans, supporters, whatever you want to call them, MAGA-pedes, Q-tards, pick, I don't give a shit. He hasn't been nearly as good as they think he's been. Because they listen to the Dan Bonginos and the John Solomons and the Sarah Carters and the Jack Posobics and the Mike Cernoviches and the rest of them that are all filling you with half of the fucking story. And when it becomes real to people, as Lee Shanahan was telling me this morning, as people really begin to realize that Bongino is refusing to talk about the real issues surrounding Russiagate and Ukraine. He's avoiding Bill Browder. He's avoiding the real issues. Why is he avoiding those things? He's avoiding those things for the same reasons that Marco Rubio keeps talking about how great a person Sergei Magnitsky was. Okay? It's because it's important for them to be able to keep these narratives alive so that they can continue to use them as legal bludgeons to punish their enemies. Without the Magnitsky Act, we can't even sanction half the people we've been sanctioning. Do you understand? That's part of this. And by the way, thanks to Katza and John McCain, Trump doesn't even really have any control over that anymore. The Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of State have control over those. Mike Pompeo and Steve Mnuchin have more control over our foreign policy, ultimately, than Trump does. All right, that's a lot to go into, but I'm going to try and go back to over some of the comments now and see if I can fill in some of the blanks here. I'm not going to go back too far though. I'm just looking for a couple of things I want to actually talk for. So Thordum says this is a great comment. He's actually thankful for Pompeo's brute force type of diplomacy because he's alienated so many allies and damaged the empire so much, and made everybody abundantly aware of how crazy they are in Washington and how quickly they need to start realigning how they trade with each other, how they do business with each other, and and what contracts and what relationships they're going to have with each other. Everything is changing very, very quickly on that front because the Trump administration's foreign policy and the weaponization of the dollar has been so acute that it has now raised the cost of using dollars. So look, I read a great article today on Bloomberg, not a great article, but a reasonable article today on Bloomberg saying, hey, look, there's a reason why the dollar hasn't been dethroned yet. It's because it's too much, the costs are too high, and it would be harder for people to switch to use local currencies because the dollar is so cheap to use, because it's so pervasive, and yada, 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 and it's so liquid, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but then you raise the cost to the point where, well, if you say the wrong thing, or if you talk to the wrong person, or you do business with the wrong person, you can't do business anymore. That raises the cost of using the dollar. Now, those first couple of costs will be absorbed, will be dealt with. Once they get to a certain point where now you can't even prosecute your fucking business anymore, that's when you make the switch to local currencies. Then let's just use that. It's actually easier. And when it's just one company, is one thing. When it's a lot of companies, when it's a lot of small businesses, and all of a sudden small businesses can get loans in their local currency easier than they can get loans in dollars, which is what's starting to happen in Russia, by the way, which is part of what I was trying to say in my latest blog post that I wrote this afternoon. When you get to that point, and then that starts to propagate itself across the entirety of the Eurasian Economic Union, the Belarus and the Armenia and Kyrgyzstan and Iran eventually and Turkey and the rest of them. When it gets to that point, what happens to the ruble is all of a sudden the ruble doesn't go from just an also-ran, it goes to something that could actually function as a regional reserve currency. Now, the United States is always trying to stop that. But keep an eye on all that. It changes everything. And so, yes, Pompeo's lack of diplomacy has only hastened that process I just described. Because people are getting, more people are getting a clearer picture of just what it is going to cost to continue to do business in dollars. Because now the Mafia Don is in the White House and thinks everybody owes him a kiss of his ring. That's Trump's fatal flaw. Let's see. Some Trump supporters, says Star Trooper, are blind when it comes to certain things like Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo. I ran into a couple of those today on Twitter, believe it or not. They are just as blind as Trump when it comes to who the swamp actually is. I know. Trump is finally, after 3 years, getting an idea of just who is and who isn't swamp. And it's pretty much everybody. And they're all out together. Stoyanovich says, in response to my discussion about Netanyahu losing power, that he would start World War III not to lose immunity from prosecution. He's already tried to start World War III at least 3 times in the last 4 years that I can count off the top of my head. And Vladimir Putin has had to take him to task at least twice on it. And I know that Donald Trump took him to task on it at least once. And both of them have told him that we're not doing this. You're not going to get me to go to war with Iran over a fucking drone. Not happening, baby. Go fuck yourself. I honestly think that Trump has said nothing about Israel in months. In months. And I honestly think that he's gone as far as he's willing to go, and it's only Pompeo who continues to prosecute, who continues to push things the way he has, because Trump isn't pushing Israel at all. If Trump gets neocon and attacks Iran, I'm totally out. Dude, I'm already mostly there anyway. I don't think he's going to do it. I think he understands what the stakes are. Trump is a definite upgrade over Clinton. The fact that I have to say that is an indictment of the system. Exactly. I mean, no, Trump is, I'm 3 years gone now. I don't get to say that, we don't get the excuse, well, we could have been Hillary Clinton. Well, fuck that. No, it wasn't Hillary Clinton. He won. But, when winning looks like losing. Yeah, no more regime change. What's happening in Bolivia? What's happening? What was attempted to happen in Venezuela? What was attempted last week to happen in Iran? What's going on in Lebanon? Iraq? These are all regime changes. Hong Kong. I've been over this 1,000 times. Hong Kong is a regime change operation. Maybe his cabinet simply lies to him. It does. Zelensky. It absolutely does. It lies to him at every point. Thorium says, Tom, do you think Pompeo also wants to leave Secretary of State because of the OPCW Duma cover-up story? Seems to me like a lot of cleaning up is happening since the whistleblower started to talk. Maybe. But I don't think that really goes anywhere. I think that's something that's too inside baseball for us, for the rest of the world. They're not going to care because the media is not going to pick up on it in any way that matters, because it then paints Russia in a positive light, and that's not allowed. As long as the Brits, the Americans are controlling, and the Israelis are controlling the media, Western media, which for the most part they do. Now, here's an interesting point. I haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, and I meant to write a follow-up. I'm going to write a follow-up to the article I wrote about Russia later in the week, most likely, because I do want to talk about this. So yesterday, I see a tweet from the great Brett Harris. I don't know if he's in the audience tonight or not, about an article in Der Spiegel, like the epitome of German establishment media. Der Spiegel is like Time magazine, except sadly more reputable. It's a 16-page story debunking Bill Browder's entire narrative about Magnitsky. Now, how in the fuck does this happen? I mean, how does that happen? And why is nobody real? I mean, I haven't really reacted to it. I started to react to it this afternoon. I was going to add it. I was going to add a note in my article today, and the narrative just didn't allow for it. Why did this story happen? Now, let's do a little backing up. Let's do the George Webb thing. Let's do the Lee Stranahan thing. Let's throw some threads together. See what we come up with. Right. It's the first thing that pops into my head. What's been going on in Germany? What's been going on in Europe? The Russians are slowly but surely working their way back into the favor of the European Union. Angela Merkel has spent whatever political capital she has left to get Nord Stream 2 pipeline past Donald Trump. Right? Germany's economy is dying, as North on 60 just reminded us. I've been banging on this thing since I wrote my first article about Germany's dead economy walking back in fucking April, for Christ's sake. Russia's now part of PACE again, right? The Parliamentary Authority of the Council of Europe. They're back in the Council of Europe. EU, Merkel and Putin have been working behind the scenes, have been working together to lay the groundwork to end the sanctions on the EU imposed because of Crimea, right? And the war in the Donbass. And it all has to do with the Minsk agreements. And it all has to do with, and all of these little red lines that Angela Merkel had laid out. Well, there has to be a gas transit contract. Well, Gazprom last week offered an extension or a new 1-year deal to at least keep the gas flowing. That was a nicety from Putin, right? Nord Stream 2 pipeline permits have been issued. Nord Stream 2 gonna be a few months delayed, but it's gonna happen. Germany needs natural gas, and they need the gas from Russia. It's got to come in. There's no way around it, right? Merkel needs a political win. How is she going to get a political win? How is she going to extricate herself from the anti-Russian narrative that has been so thoroughly played out for the last 5 years, unless we start to attack it at its core? What trouble is Donald Trump in? He's in hot water because he started investigating some of the corruption of his political opponents in Ukraine, which started the process that led to the sanctions. And then, but at the same time, the justification for those sanctions and the push to create an EU-wide version of the Magnitsky Act, which is still not ratified. It's been out there, they've talked about it, they haven't put it forth and turned it into law yet. Hasn't happened. And now Merkel is allowing a 16-page expose in Der Spiegel, Browder, and the Magnitsky story. This tells me more than anything that Merkel is in serious political trouble, and she's starting the process. That she, in many ways, I almost think that she realizes she's probably going to be out of power by the middle of next year. 2, in order to start getting the process, in order to save Germany's economy, politically, the sanctions are a non-starter. They're almost as hated as the immigration policy, from what I understand. She's getting killed on the right. She's getting killed on the left. Both the Linke and AfD want the sanctions ended. They've got a populist left party and a populist right party, and they both want the sanctions ended. The CSU wants the sanctions ended. Bavaria has been getting killed because of the sanctions. But you can't do that until you start attacking the story, until you start attacking Browder. So was this an olive branch from Angela Merkel to not only Vladimir Putin, but Donald Trump? Or is Trump too fucking stupid to realize what Browder's all about? I don't think so. I think Putin told Trump everything about Browder in their original meeting in Helsinki, which is why the fucking world went crazy and started talking about him needing to be freaking removed from power. Okay? John Brennan called him a traitor, yada, yada, yada. If you look at what's happening, that story tells me that Merkel is going to push to have the sanctions lifted next year. And because it's one of the only ways she's going to be able to save herself politically in Germany. And it's the right thing to do at this point. Yeah, the European Council told Ukraine to deal with Putin over the gas contract, Literacy said. I agree with that. I know that. And that it's really important that they end this. Now the problem that they end this gas transit problem, of course, is that Zelensky's in a very tight position. He needs to end the war with in the Donbass. He needs to cut a deal with Putin on gas transit. He's got just over a month to do it. And again, the deal doesn't have to be much. They can sign something. And remember, Putin and Zelensky are going to meet real soon now, like in the next couple of days. So all of this stuff is going to happen in the next couple of days. So you got a favorable story from from Putin's perspective on Browder and Der Spiegel. That starts to set the tone so that when he sits down with Zelensky and they start and they make noise about implementing as much of Minsk II as possible. Remember, Putin also, again, another one of Merkel's red lines was that the crew and the ships that were seized in the Kerch Strait incident last year, that was another reason why sanctions were put on. Putin gave the ships back. He gave the sailors back. So, that can come off. Those sanctions can come off. Okay, let's get everybody to agree. Let's get both sides to agree with all of the things that stipulate Minsk II. Remember, Russia's not a signatory to Minsk II. Another one of Merkel's red lines out the door. And then there's the Browder thing. Trump has given up on Nord Stream 2. Jonathan. And yeah, Ted Cruz is going to do his lunatic thing, and Trump will just veto it. It won't matter. It is a dumb question. Why are they rabidly Russophobic? Why are most of the Senate rabidly Russophobic? Because most of them are in the pocket of Israel. Israel is rabidly Russophobic. Because it's good for business. That's why. It's good for it's good for Israel. It's good for the MIC. It's good for everybody. If Russia's the boogeyman, then they can still sell weapons all around the world. It's not that hard, dude. What's your take on Putin saying the dollar will collapse soon? Putin's wishfully thinking. I think if Putin's time frame is 5 years, okay. If he's thinking 18 months, The euro has to collapse first. Don't forget that France lost out on numerous military contracts worth billions of euros once the sanctions started. Yeah, they were the helicopter frigate. Right. Yeah. Zelensky says Zelensky has the Banderas on one side and Kolomoisky on the other side. It's very difficult for him. I agree. He's in a very, very difficult position, and Putin has done everything he can to help Zelensky along. And I think at a certain level, Trump is in some ways also trying to help him along. But the truth of the matter is that the Ukraine is a failed state. When Browder is on Fox, he praises Trump, and when he's on the shill stations, he's against him. Well, Browder's MI6/CIA, so what a shock. So Brett Harris is correcting both myself and the original questioner, saying that Putin didn't say that the dollar was going to collapse soon. He said that the U.S. dollar is losing dominance and can't be used to attack economies anymore. The effect is not the same. It is not the same thing. I also agree with that statement. Not completely. It's being used right now to attack Lebanon. The Lebanese are vulnerable. They're still vulnerable to a dollar, with a complete collapse of dollar liquidity. So are a lot of other countries. Even Iran is still struggling with this. Which is exactly, Star Trooper, what the Russians have been doing, buying gold and silver. Putin absolutely did say collapse soon, word for word. In different places, he said different things. I remember him saying what you said. I'm just relaying what Brett said, and we're going to go back and forth. He said both of those things, in my mind. I've seen him say those things. I've seen them say those things quoted on frickin' so the bigger question is going to be, and this is an interesting thing. We're at 52 minutes, and the last thing I want to talk, I do want to talk a couple of things about what I'm thankful for. One of the things I am thankful for is the following. We're finally seeing the Russian central bank act like a problem, like they're trying to actually solve problems. The Iran is all right. I'll stop. Thornham asked if that Iran is about to join the EU. Yes, they are, the Eurasian Economic Union, and that will help Iran have free trade agreement with them. Now, here's the thing. Let's stop. What I'm thankful for here is that the Bank of Russia is finally starting to act like someone trying to solve problems as opposed to create them for the Russian government. One of the things I was trying to say in my article this afternoon, I don't know that I actually got it properly stated. In order for the ruble to internationalize as a regional currency tying the Eurasian Economic Union together, ruble liquidity has to rise. You have to double the amount of rubles that can flow around the world, right? Sure, we could lower there needs to be more rubles in at least the current exchange rate, just because there will be a higher demand for them. And we're starting to see this. The percentage of trade settled in rubles by Russian companies is rising. Now, aggressively, they want to rise that by another 50% over where it currently is by 2024. So from about around 20 to 21% of total trade up to about 30%. Now, the understand that, as rubles flow in and out, right, and they build up on countries' accounts, it's going to raise the demand for Russian bonds, and we're seeing that, right? As the Russian central bank opens up the liquidity spigots, and their monetary policy has been so tight and crazy, and the amount of like the amount of that M2 has been rising in Russia is purely as a function of the savings rate, right? People are just getting the rubles and saving them for fuck's sake, and the bank having to pay out at that elevated interest rate for all these, while people still spend dollars and euros and everything else, and they hold on to the rubles because the rubles are paying 8 and 9%. Okay, so when you have that situation, you never get the kind of money velocity, the rising money velocity that you actually want. You actually get falling money velocity. This is part of the problem, and they don't need falling money velocity in the Russian domestic economy. Okay, but IMF trained economists are scared to death of inflation, scared to death of rising prices. So, but as the ruble internationalizes, as it stabilizes, internationalizes, which is in its very early stages here. Over the last year and a half, it's begun. The real effective exchange rate of the ruble is rising, and it's rising independently of the exchange rate of the ruble's exchange rate relative to the dollar. Period. This just tells you that the more people are demanding rubles faster than the Bank of Russia was willing to print them. Trade is expanding. Russian economy is expanding. Everybody's, all regional trade with Russia, with all of its regional partners, is all rising. It's all rising at 20 to 30% a year. So this is incredibly important to think about what's going to happen over the course of the next 5 years across Asia, including Iran, Turkey, and especially the big powerhouses: India, Iran, Turkey. Right? Those are the big powerhouse economies, relatively speaking. Okay. So it's just something that we should be thankful for, because what it's allowing now is going to allow rising ruble liquidity will actually allow for an acceleration of de-dollarization of the entire region, as long as the Russians continue to act honorably across all of their with all of their international partners. They keep all their promises. They work both sides of the geopolitical divide. They do what they've been doing. They continue to work diplomatically. This is a very important point, because 20 years ago, the ruble was garbage. Today, it has to now step up to become one of the world's major currencies. In order to protect all of those countries that have hitched their horses to Russia's wagon. Okay? All right. Jawuku asked me, do I think Boris will win in a landslide? Boris Johnson in Ukraine? Yes, I do. Do I think that the Brexit Party will win about 20 seats? Yes, I do. Will that matter? Probably not, because I think Labour is going to collapse completely. Hey, Tom, do you ever look at 5G stocks? Not really. I'm not at this point, I'm not really a technology guy. Zaloni says the dollar is collapsing in Russia very soon. No one wants them any longer. People save in ruble and yuan. I agree. It's beginning. The change is going to happen swiftly. Once all the dollar liabilities are gone, which most of them are gone, there's no dollar liabilities left in Russia. And that's what's important. Real Face asks, am I related to Crazy Pelosi? No, I'm not. That's just silly. Is the IMF going to stop loans to Ukraine if Kolomoisky doesn't divest from banking? Brett, I can't answer that question because I don't really understand. I don't really know. I should know that situation better than I do. I can't answer that question. I wish I could. I'm very thankful, Jonathan Gillespie says, for my chickens and my poultry, and hope to make a real living out of it. Good luck, dude. It's a hard life. But if you can make it work, and you should absolutely be thankful for your dogs, because your dogs are what keep your chickens and poultry I'm getting at. You guys are on top of this the situation in Ukraine a lot better than I am at this point, I will say. Funfang says, I'm sorry to say Brexit Party won't win more than 4 or 5 seats. Wish more, but very unlikely. Farage has gone full Tory in support, no question. Turnout will be pretty low. I don't know about that. I don't agree, Funfang. I've been watching Nigel on a daily basis, and I think he's trying to give it to the Tories in every way imaginable. And he's been trying to get them to stand down in all the seats that they need to stand down in. And he's making the case that to tell the people, don't vote for the Tories in these Labour marginals. Let us have them. Vote for us. We will give you, we will start to give you a voice for radical change. And I think that's the best. I think that's the best campaign message he's got at this moment in time. And with Corbyn going full fucking Marxist, go fucking crazy over the top Marxist, like AOC looks like a rational person relative to Corbyn's manifesto. I don't think that's going to be a hard sell. Now, I will say this. Part of me almost believes that Corbyn went full Marxist to scare people into voting for Boris. I don't know. I don't see that. I just don't see it this way. Oof. All right, guys. It is just about time to go. A couple of things I want to say before I leave. And I haven't prepared any remarks on this subject, but it is Thanksgiving. It is one of my favorite holidays. Just that time, not being a terribly religious person, Thanksgiving is the day that has always held significance for me since I've moved away from home, because that was the holiday that I could actually spend with people living away from home. So it was my family. It was for us when we were in college. It was our place that when everybody else didn't have anywhere else to go for Thanksgiving, well, they came to our house. And Thanksgiving at one point for us was as many as 16, 18 people. Some of whom I barely even knew. But, no one should be alone on the holidays. And so from that perspective, with, all of this, the politics and the positioning and the black pilling and the red pilling and the this and that, all that stuff, at the end of the day, really doesn't matter. It's important. It's helping us try and navigate this situation as best we can. We have to deal with it. We don't want to deal with it. We'd rather just go about our lives and actually, be productive for our living, right? And actually, I, in some ways, almost wish I could go out and get a real job, right? Or at least if I was going to be a real writer, to write fiction or something else and not what I currently write. Though some of you, I'm sure, believe that what I write is fiction. And it's important that we remind ourselves. It's important that we always take the time. What we do locally, what we do for each other on a day-to-day basis is far more important than any of this shit. Far more important. We live in a world where the people who keep the lights on, keep the water running, make sure the internet service is working, they're denigrated on a day-to-day basis. Shit on. By people who don't even know where any of it comes from. Be thankful for somebody. Be thankful for the line worker on your local electrical company. They got your service back up and running after a hurricane. That guy's a fucking hero. Far more than your average soldier. Because that guy's got a mortgage and a family. Doing a job that he may not even like. Guess what? He's doing it anyway. Do Marxist Democrats even celebrate Thanksgiving? They're not thankful for anything, and they don't believe in anything, so why the fuck should they? Unfortunately, they do. Riverboat. Politics stuff gets overheated real quick. Have to step back a couple times a day. One of the things I've learned in doing this for as long as I've been doing it, look, for years, I was on the other side of this conversation, screaming at the walls and all of it. And in a time before we even had an opportunity to really listen to people who were like-minded, right? Always have to walk away. Always have to keep it in perspective. Always. This too shall pass, and there will be something tomorrow. And as I said the other day, I'm like, I really wish sometimes that they just stop being them for about 20 minutes. Just so we can all catch our breath, deal with the crap that they just threw at us 20 minutes. But they won't. They can't stop. Because they're fucking junkies. And junkies are always looking for the next fix. All right, guys. Enjoy your holiday. Enjoy, even if you're not American, understand that this is one of the few things Americans do really, really well. We smoke large birds and carve out. A lot of people watch football, but I don't. But it's a good day. It's an excellent day. It's one of the few traditions that doesn't really have the state at its center, and should always remember that. I don't like to talk politics on Thanksgiving. All right, guys. Enjoy your holiday. Enjoy your week. Podcast will be out tomorrow, and I will be maybe back Friday night. I don't know that I'm going to do a live stream Friday night. Depends. I have a couple of friends coming over. I may just, give it a pass. So, if so, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your holiday. Be well. Keep your stick on the ice.